Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Revenue Rebels. I'm here today with James Stone of HubSpot, and I'm Max Greenwald, CEO and founder of Warmly. Mid-market companies have traditionally been defined by slow and steady growth and much simpler sales cycles in the enterprise. But enter 2025 and the age of AI, and these same companies are aggressively pursuing transformational changes while expanding their buying committees. To help your team better understand how to sell into the mid-market, I'm joined now by James Stone, head of mid-market sales at HubSpot. James has been President's Club 9 times in his 14-year tenure so far at HubSpot. And during his tenure, he's also been part of the company's just crazy evolution, going from, I believe, maybe 30 million in ARR all the way to the 2.5 billion household name that we all know and love today. Welcome to Revenue Rebels, James from HubSpot.
Thanks, Mac. Glad to be here.
Let's just talk about the elephant in the room here. 14 years at HubSpot. I mean, what a hell of a journey. And maybe give us a couple of highlights that have happened along your career journey and HubSpot's too.
Sure. Yeah, just celebrated my 14-year anniversary yesterday and kicked things off in 2011. I was one of our first BDRs. Many people, when they think of HubSpot, they don't think outbound. They think naturally about the inbound motion. But I was part of an experimental team as one of our first BDRs, solely reaching out cold to new prospects that didn't yet know about HubSpot. And then ultimately just grew my career. After being a BDR, moved into a sales role, after which I actually took a little bit of a leap and I founded what is now our HubSpot for Startups program back in 2014. Ran that program for a couple of years before the business really looked to segmentation and rebuilt sort of the foundations of our sales organization. And then for the last now 8+ years, been in our mid-market division and recently been overseeing the US mid-market team, which is our second largest team within the organization for about the last 18 months. So it's been a great ride.
How many sellers in that division?
Yeah, so we've got about 235 sellers, about 37 managers and 6 directors, all under myself.
That is a lot of people. You know, when you address the whole division at, revenue kickoff, for example, what are some of the big themes that you're trying to make sure you proliferate across the department?
Sure. I think right now we're really focused on this theme of mastery and improving our sort of overall skills as a sales organization. I think that as we've pivoted over the last few years, given some of the themes you've touched on at the beginning of the call, we've had to really refocus towards more of the mechanics and fundamentals as an organization in order to continue our scale. You know, we've sort of been like a run and gun, been able to grow through just our ability of leveraging a great product in our inbound sales motion. But as of now, we really need to, I think, refocus having a great product, but really coupling that with a great sales process and good fundamentals as a sales organization. So this year is all about the strategy of improving those fundamentals, becoming better sellers, and really tapping into that strategy, for the broader organization. Is so many of our sellers are new employees here at HubSpot. We onboarded about 100 new sellers last year, just alone. So a lot of inexperienced HubSpot sellers, but looking to sort of upskill them across the board.
Absolutely. Yeah. How do you think about training and mentorship? I mean, do you pair sellers with one another, more experienced folks with more junior folks?
Yeah, that's actually a great call out. We realized we had to revamp our onboarding process. When you're onboarding upwards of 10 new hires a month, we had found that you're relying a lot on the sales manager who at the same time is onboarding or has onboarded and managing about 7 or 8 reps. So we actually introduced a brand new, we call it our RAM program, Ramp Acceleration Manager. And so we tapped a mid-market seller who is extremely good, and they built out an entirely new onboarding program. So for their first 3 or 4 months, they're really coupled with that individual, helping them understand the fundamentals of how to sell HubSpot, how to sell in general. And so we've had to rebuild that entire program in addition to building, the right reporting and the right insights for our managers to identify root causes of where reps are failing or where they're succeeding. So it's been a lot of it gone back to building for scale, revamping that program, standardizing a lot of the reporting across the board, and really teaching our managers how to find that root cause of behavior through data rather than just relying on gut. A lot of great softwares that can help out with that.
Yeah, one of the things I absolutely love is HubSpot reporting. I mean, the product's come a long way in the last couple of years. I'm guessing you guys use HubSpot reporting internally. Maybe what are some tips and tricks for managers out there that are trying to build their dashboards in terms of helping give visibility to sellers or managers to better manage their team?
Yeah, one of the pitfalls I typically find a lot of people fall into is you're heavily reliant on engagements. So how many calls, how many emails, how many LinkedIn messages, which is actually a pretty big trend that we're recognizing has been seeing a lot more positive results. Usually if you just focus a lot on the engagements, you miss the meat or sort of the core behavior changes that a rep needs. So usually what I recommend is we look more at qualification of the pipeline that they generate. So we try and look at where is it a lot of the pipeline is being generated from. So don't think of it as just the top line metric of this rep generated 15,000 in pipeline this month. Try and identify where did it come from? How much of it was from a business development rep? How much of it was rep driven? They created it themselves. How much was from inbound? How much was net new versus the install base? It's funny. I mean, reps can achieve their quota in a variety of different ways, but what we usually find is the reps that are reliant on more sources that they don't control, so not rep driven, not working with your BDR, that's usually those early indicators that you can identify that they might find when their quota becomes high post their ramp. They tend to fail and they tend to falter. So I'd recommend trying to dig a little bit deeper into the data there, and also try and leverage as much real time, so daily or weekly reporting rather than monthly. We work in too fast paced of a business. Where as a manager, if you're just looking back every month at how a rep performed, you lose those key touch points every week. And so we typically will really rely on daily reporting, but more importantly, weekly, so that managers can pivot, adapt, and build the right plans with their reps, try and help them improve.
Great and thoughtful answer. Maybe to kind of break it down to, let's say, for the mid-market in particular, roughly, would you say that your reps are 50% inbound, 50% outbound? What percent self-source versus done by BDR? This is a debate that we have internally at our company, and obviously it depends on website traffic and scale and, number of people on your team. But rough benchmarks, I think people would love to benchmark against what HubSpot sees in the mid-market.
Yeah, sure. Roughly, obviously changes each month and with seasonality, but I'd say probably about 25% of our pipeline is coming from our business development org. And I'd say then an additional 25 to 30 is coming from rep driven. So they're proactively doing outbound prospecting, trying to generate net new business, or proactively going into our install base. And then it's now shifted. That's the overwhelming majority now. I'd now say probably about 40, 50% of our revenue stems from either inbound or our partner organization. We've been really focusing a lot more on our partners and helping them improve their ability to generate leads for our business. And we've been seeing a lot more co-selling with our partners over the last couple of years. Naturally, as a company scales, you tend to find that having HubSpot own a lot of the onboarding isn't the best economically. And so we're trying to tap a lot more into our partner organization. Is when clients of ours are managed or co-sold with partners, their retention rate, their upsell rate drastically improves. And so it's also helped a lot with sort of gross revenue retention and churn for us, which has been great too.
Nice. Obviously, you've learned a ton being at HubSpot the last 14 years. I'm sure the product looked pretty different 14 years ago too. And with this pretty amazing President's Club streak, maybe talk to me about, what it looks like to kind of be at a business, watch this huge scale and really grow your career personally in a kind of a larger organization, versus thinking about ever going outside and going to a different company.
Yeah, sure. So I make the joke, when I started at HubSpot, HubSpot only had 3 tools. It was not a phenomenal product now looking at what it is that HubSpot offers today. And so I think back to sort of 2011 to 2014, we were such a great marketing and sales organization. When I started, I, for lack of a better phrase, was locked in this room for 4 weeks. All we learned was how to sell, how to work through, at the time, our acronym was GPCT, goals, plans, challenges, and timeline. Try and understand your buyer and your buyer's business and the team that they work with versus thinking about pitching a product or a solution. And over time, that naturally evolved. We've gone through numerous sort of strategic pivots. I mean, I remember when we went from just one piece of software, that only had 3 different levels, to then incorporating a usage-driven model where we saw a second price axis, which allowed our install base to start increasing the amount that they were paying us. And then going through a multi-product with now our Sales Hub and CRM, and now really a platform offering, multiple hubs that you can cross-sell and upsell to different parts of the organization. So it's been really interesting to see the different ways in which that we've adapted our model to generate more revenue. And I would say that at every opportunity that I had, naturally as salespeople, we're pretty selfish. We're thinking about our own commission checks and our own numbers. But what I'd always recommend for people in their career is follow the revenue, not just of yourself, but try and put yourself in a position for that next phase of evolution and growth. It's what led me to lead and create the HubSpot for Startups program with my colleague, John Sullivan. We found all of these scale-up organizations that were naturally going to grow potentially with HubSpot. We found an untapped market. And so we wanted to go ahead and develop that program for them. Same thing goes with when we segmented. HubSpot's product was built for the mid-market, those companies that are 25 to 200 employees. And we found that was the best opportunity and arguably one of the most, if not the most successful segment, at HubSpot for a long period of time. And so always tried to follow the revenue and think about what that next pivot is and try and be one of those individuals that really lean into the new way in which that you need to sell. So today, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit more depth, the mid-market space, you as a seller need to personalize and customize your process to the prospect. They expect a lot more from you. They can go online now and learn from YouTube videos, anywhere on the HubSpot website, exactly what we do. But they rely on you and really understanding their business and where it is that you can offer value or what the cost of doing nothing would really impact, that business. And so that's really where I think we're going to see our next phase of evolution is really putting a stake in the ground, so to speak, as to building a methodology here at HubSpot as to how to sell appropriately, being that we're fortunate we're selling a product we use every day. And I think that's pretty rare.
I mean, absolutely. And actually, Warmly has that too. We're lucky to be able to use our product every day as well. And are very grateful for our partnership with HubSpot, our deep integration and, pushing our intent data into your systems, et cetera. But yeah, let's start by defining the mid-market for a second, because I want to make sure that, for listeners, especially because HubSpot it is more of a generally down-market product, how do you define mid-market at HubSpot?
Yeah, good question. So for us right now, our mid-market segment is companies 25 to 200 employees. What's interesting is that sort of by fitting our small business segment is up to 25 employees, and then our corporate or enterprise segment is 200 employees plus. So that's currently how we configure it across the globe.
Great. Okay. For those listening, I think take the following advice, thinking through what we might look toward to applying companies about 25 to 200 in size. And I'm really excited to just kind of learn about what you've seen with the kind of changes in the mid-market space. First I want to talk about kind of buying committees. So it used to be that buying committees were something that happened at companies maybe 1,000 and greater. You have to multi-thread, you'd have to get a couple of people on the line, you'd have to talk to multiple different stakeholders, et cetera. Obviously, some products are simpler than others, but even at the 25-person scale, Warmly's seeing the need, and we span sales and marketing, so it's pretty normal to talk to multiple stakeholders. But maybe talk to us a little bit about what the playbook that you all have developed, maybe at your training that you give new sellers, or that you find most useful for the typical customer 25 to 200 when it comes to attracting the attention of the mid-market buying committee, or maybe even you can just give an overview of what the sales cycle typically looks like.
Yeah, of course. I'm always a fan of, regardless of who in the organization you have the opportunity to speak to, could be a low level, marketing manager all the way up to the C-suite. It's important to just try and get your in anywhere that you can. What I think that we find in mid-market organizations, and we find this a lot from our small business reps that move into mid-market, they typically fall victim to thinking that every person they speak to is an actual decision maker. They usually will say, and we've all been there, oh yeah, I'm the decision maker, this is my decision. But lo and behold, never the case. Usually what I find...
And then you hear reps going, oh, this one's for sure going to close this month, absolutely, and then it's not the case.
Tell me about it. We've all seen that story. Usually what I find, though, is I simplify it down to you've got the individual, the team, and the business. So what I've always tried to find is that individual, what is their motivation, what's their role entail, and what is it that they're measured on? And you'll usually find that there's some focus of pain, or there's some, and that pain can be monetary, it can be in time, or there's missed opportunity. Now, where I feel like a lot of people falter is they'll sort of limit it to that one individual without asking, how is it that impacts with team? What's the team look like? And usually you'll find in a mid-market organization, it's very rare that there's maybe only one person that's managing a particular responsibility. There's always a team that's associated with that, whether it be cross-functionally or multiple people within that team or organization. And then you try and uncover, does the business feel the same way? Is it the business priority? Who is it that tasked you with this? What's their role? What's their team look like? And then I even go as deep as to say, are you all remote? Do you all get to see one another in the same room? Are you hopping on Zooms all the time? That dynamic sort of impact how the rest of the process is going to look. What I've found, though, is more often than not, specifically over the last couple of years, you'll go ahead and try and build a business case with one individual or a team. But given the macroeconomic climate right now, and I think businesses need to grow while also cutting costs, being much more of a focus. And you see it a lot in tech, with the landscape as how businesses are being valued and what they're measured on. But when you think about more standard businesses, whether it be business services, financial services, healthcare, at its core, they're all trying to generate more revenue by cutting costs. And so when you're looking at that, you follow the dollar. You've got C-suite executives like a CEO, a CFO, VPs of finance. You've always got a sales organization or some type of service organization that's always going to be touching the customer. And so what I find is that really with our sales process, it's building sort of this proof of concept, understanding there is a real need and pain, proposing a solution, and then thinking about the different roles and their responsibilities you need to pitch to. So your presentation to a CFO, they don't need, everything about how great HubSpot is. They don't need to typically see the tool. They're only thinking dollars and cents. And what we found as well is that there's much more emphasis on procurement. Security has become much more important, looking at our terms and conditions, thinking about scale and growth with a product. As we'll get back to sort of our warmest leads, without a doubt, the people that bought HubSpot and then they started another company, and they have to go through an entirely new buying process within their organization. And so when you think sort of taking more of a 30,000 foot view, how does this business purchase software? You'll start to, I think, be exposed to multiple different individuals, need to see, the contract and, have their finger more or less on the evaluation process. And you'll realize that there are probably 3 or 4 other individuals that will need to take a look either at the product themselves or at minimum at the agreement before it is that you can actually get started. So those are that's I'd say the biggest trend that I've been recognizing in probably the last couple of years.
Nice. One of the ones that seemed newish to me is when folks ask for the underlying AI model infrastructure that you're using, if you're an AI product. I've been surprised at people who are like, hey, I know you use OpenAI, but, tell me about the model, how fair is the model? How robust is it? Do you store our data? Do you train models, AI models based on our data? I'm not sure if you see something similar, but it's just sort of surprising. That's been included recently with a lot of our security and privacy questionnaires.
Yeah, I've certainly seen it. I mean, everybody's, I think, very, very new to the notion of having your data being leveraged to building these models. So we tend to find, first question always comes up, the data that I'm putting in here, who else has access to it? Typically with a lot of financial services or healthcare, it can get, very nitty-gritty. But for the most part, what's really been nice, and I think this is really a leadership and a culture component of HubSpot, whenever it is we typically build a product. In this instance, we've got our Breeze component, which is phenomenal. We allow people to enrich their data and to continuously enrich their data. We'll also incorporate things like our AI agents and ability to leverage the HubSpot platform to provide recommendations or do tasks for you in the background. All of the data that you're putting in, it's being re-enriched consistently. And so we've tried to build packages that allow people to do sort of like a one and done. But then if they enjoy it and see their growth with HubSpot, which is nice, you add more people in the HubSpot system, you add more leads, more clients. Many people want to maintain a very clean database. And it's something I think certainly myself, but a lot of sales leaders find frustration with is obviously outdated data. When you have a team that's scaling and growing, accounts change hands so quickly. I mean, for example, we just go through our recard every year. We just started 15 new sellers this month. All of them were given accounts that had been previously owned by reps at different stages of HubSpot development. I mean, I'll even find occasionally an account that I had touched 10 years ago. And, you look at the data sometimes, you're like, who's looked at this? How often has it been moved? It's a pretty big sticking point for a lot of sales leaders in order to help them grow.
Is it an honor for a new AE to get over the finish line, a deal that you couldn't close yourself?
I mean, you have to. You find when you see a deal close, you're like, oh, I remember that deal. And I remember the prospect who didn't move forward with it. And then you lo and behold, see a whole new team, a whole new CEO, a whole new VP of marketing, a whole new VP of sales. The beauty of HubSpot is you tend to find people come back.
Is it, out of curiosity, more of a tactical tip here, but would you recommend that folks say, hey, we talked 3 years ago with a totally different team and it wasn't a fit then, but I want to see if priorities have changed? Or do you want to approach it from scratch or somewhere in the middle? Because I'm just curious, like, would the prospect of today think, well, if they didn't buy it 3 years ago, why do I want to buy it now?
Yeah, I think the devil's in the details. You usually find that if it's a brand new marketer and you see that they haven't had prior experience, it never hurts to say, I've spoken with someone at this organization before. I had some familiarity with your business. This was a challenge for them. Is it still a challenge for you? Is it still your responsibility to fix? If you tend to find that it is the same team and, you're reaching out, I tend to rely on things that, have changed over the last couple of years, whether it be our products changed and we help out, specific businesses or industries or an industry that they're similar to, providing a couple of use cases. As I've mentioned, before, it's your ability as a seller to personalize your outreach to the pains and challenges most likely that someone in that role or their team is currently dealing with. And, I get, I think 5 LinkedIn messages like a day. I get a number of cold emails myself. It's the ones that are pertinent to my roles, responsibilities, and the time of year. People that reach out to me in January have a much different pitch than if I'm in June, given the time of year that it is and the seasonality that I see. And so I think it sort of depends on the person, the team, but I think LinkedIn is the best, sort of secret sauce to try and uncover. How is someone describing themselves? What metrics do they put in? How do they describe their role? That's really where I tap into.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, basically saying, go to the prospect's LinkedIn, figure out how they describe what they think they do, and, think about, okay, if this person wants to get promoted in the next 2 years, what are the things that I can tie our success to them being able to point to? And it's really amazing the number of our customers who have told us that because they brought in a tool, a platform, or a vendor at some point in their career, that was like a marquee point for them to be able to prove they were able to hit pipeline successfully.
Yeah, 100%. It in itself is part of their role. Like they are someone that has to be an internal champion for change. And so if you can uncover, typically the question I always love to ask, and granted, it's been a little while since I've, been on a ton of cold calls, but, what would blowing it out of the water look for you? What are your metrics? And in many instances, it's funny, some people don't even have concrete metrics that their boss is giving them. But in instances where they say, I'm responsible or I'm compensated if I hit this and this, what would it look like if you hit 20% above that? And what's your plan in order to get there? Are you content and okay with things as is? Or are you willing to go ahead and take a little bit of a risk to see that additional bump? And how motivated would you be to do that? Because after a certain point, if you see a use case, your role as a seller changes. You're not trying to pitch them. You're trying to help them buy HubSpot or buy your product. And that's a significantly different role. That flip of the switch, I always visualize it as you're sitting across the table with someone. At some point, you're hopping on their side of the table and you're trying to go ahead and help pitch the next person.
Something that I think always helps, I would say sales leaders be able to offer advice to reps is when they start becoming buyers themselves. For me, now having purchased 100 SaaS tools and also sold 100 times over warmly, I kind of understand some of the tips, tricks, lingo of what I'm looking for, but also on the flip side, how to sort of empathize with what I'm looking for when I want to make moves on a tool. And that was a surprise I didn't expect.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that, very timely. I'm sure this person would laugh if she listened to this, after the fact, but our head of procurement, she's an individual that buys all of HubSpot's products. And we had her come into one of our all hands and give like our top 10 tips for procurement. And you'd be shocked at the responses that we got. Just hearing from that individual that purchased software, not just myself as their leader, but the person who's physically responsible for looking at every contract, dealing with every timeline. It's very interesting to see sort of how it is that they describe the process internally, who they need to pitch to, how long it takes. You recognize not every sale is the exact same. And it goes back to that notion of, are they in the office? How often do they speak with their boss? How is it that they have to pitch? Do they actually have a Zoom where they're speaking to the 8 people? You hear all the time, right? Oh, they've got a board meeting, on Friday. Is it in person or is it 8 people? They're all sitting from the comfort of their home, having someone, just pitch this new thing. The likelihood of 8 people all getting on board for the first time they're being pitched something is very rare. So that dynamic of how it's being pitched or the environment that it's in can make a big difference.
Really well said. I guess as we wrap things up here, James, you clearly made President's Club over and over again. For those mid-market sellers out there that are trying to up-level their game and, are figuring out all sorts of things around how to sell in 2025, what would be your parting advice for them to make their own President's Club?
Yeah, I've always been a victim of just excessive process. When you can get to that point, we all as sellers, the worst is when you're stressed at the end of a month or at the end of a quarter. And then you look back and you recognize the behavior that you could have gone ahead and changed earlier on would impact that level of stress that you have now. Find that consistent approach that you can go ahead, with eyes closed, follow every single day. That will enable you. I'm big in terms of data and looking and analyzing sort of the inputs and leading indicators. When you do that and you're hygienic, you can go back and identify where it is in your process you need to change. When you're inconsistent and reps are victims of trying a bunch of new things, that's fine. But make sure at least you can identify where in your process that you need to go ahead and change and consistently apply it to see its improvement over time. I'm always about just consistency and finding that day-to-day process that you can repeat. Because once you do it, it's gold. I think the reps that always hit consistently, they'll tell you the same thing. I do the same thing every day and I don't change it. And so if you're new to an organization, find that rep that hits 12 out of 12 months or 4 out of 4 quarters. Embody that process that they do consistently, because I guarantee you it isn't just one thing that they, were lucky enough to have happen. It's about the behavior that they exhibit every single day.
Yeah, said. Just to say it, you can't be lucky and hit 4 quarters in a row. You can't be lucky and hit it 8 quarters in a row. There's something in the way that they do what they do that's worth emulating.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. James, thank you so much for the time and coming on Revenue Rebels.
Yeah, you got it, Max. Thanks for having me.